I used to think love was unshakable. That family was a fortress, a circle of safety that could never be broken, no matter how harsh life became. But I learned something painful. When the storm comes, it's not always strangers who leave you behind, it's the very people you sacrificed everything for. This is my story. Not of wealth. Not of luxury. But of sacrifice, betrayal, and the truth I uncovered when I had nothing left to give. I was a mother before I was anything else. My days weren't about me, they were about them. My children. Every choice I made, every opportunity one turned down, every hour I worked or cried in silence, it was for them. I gave up my career to raise them. I walked away from promotions, from travel, from the version of myself that once had dreams too big to fit inside a family home. I knew, that motherhood required sacrifice, and I gave every part of me without hesitation. I cooked when I was sick. I worked 2 jobs when bills piled higher than I could breathe. I stayed up nights sewing costumes for their school plays, even when my fingers bled. My joy came from their joy. My worth was measured in their smiles. But life doesn't care about sacrifice. Life doesn't stop and applaud the quiet work of mothers. And when the ground beneath my feet began to crack, I wondered, would my children, my family, stand with me? Or would they scatter the moment I had nothing left to give? It started slowly, the unraveling. My husband had always been the provider while I managed the home. But his job became unstable. Cuts. Restructures. Suddenly, the paychecks weren't enough. I picked up work where I could, cleaning houses, late-night shifts at a diner, bookkeeping for a local shop. I never complained. We had savings once. I drained them to keep the house warm, to keep the fridge full. Vacations? Gone. Nights out? Forgotten. Even the smallest luxuries vanished. But I smiled through it. My children didn't need to see the weight I carried. Then the storm hit. My husband left. Not with an explanation, not with remorse, but with excuses. I need space. I need freedom. You've changed. As if giving him children, a home, and years of loyalty was some kind of prison. I didn't cry in front of my kids. I saved that for the bathroom at night, water running so they wouldn't hear the sobs. I told them their father loved them. I told them everything would be okay. But the truth? I was terrified. Bills stacked like walls around me. Every dollar was stretched until it screamed. And there were nights when I didn't eat, just so they could. I thought they'd see. I thought they'd understand. I thought the sacrifice would matter. It was my eldest who spoke first. She was in her late teens, old enough to understand, but young enough to still be cruel without knowing the weight of her words. Mom, why can't we be like other families? Why can't you just get it together? Everyone else has money for clothes, for trips. You're embarrassing me. Her words cut deeper than any blade. Not because they were true, but because I had given up everything to prevent that kind of pain. And still, it wasn't enough. I smiled at her, though inside I was breaking. One day, I told her, you'll understand what it means to give everything for someone else. But she didn't understand. Not then. Maybe not ever. My son grew quiet. Withdrawn. He didn't complain, but silence can be louder than words. And my youngest, still a child, clung to me as though she knew I was the only anchor left in the storm. The whispers started in the family. My sister, my cousins, even my parents. She should have worked harder. She should have managed better. Maybe her husband left because she wasn't enough. They judged me from the outside, forgetting that I had held the family together for years while they lived their own lives. And so, I waited. I watched. I sacrificed, still. But in my heart, I began to wonder, when everything was stripped away, when I had nothing left to give, who would remain by my side? It was a test I never planned to give, but one life forced upon me. The answer came slowly, revealed in small betrayals and quiet abandonments. There was the day my eldest asked for money I didn't have. I explained gently that I couldn't give her what she wanted. Her response? She stormed out, shouting, "You're useless. You're ruining my life." There was the afternoon my sister visited. I thought she came to help. Instead, she lectured me about pulling myself together before leaving early for dinner with friends. Even my parents, the ones who had raised me, looked at me differently. As though my struggle was a stain on the family name. And yet, through it all, I kept sacrificing. Because my children, even when they turned against me, were still mine. And love doesn't stop, even when it hurts. But here's the truth I didn't expect. When you're stripped bare, when you've lost everything, money, marriage, reputation, you begin to see people for who they truly are. Masks fall away in the fire of hardship. And those who abandon you in your darkest hour? They were never yours to begin with. But there were surprises, too. People I never expected stood quietly beside me. A neighbor who left groceries on my porch without a word. A coworker who slipped cash into my pocket after a long shift. Strangers who gave what family withheld. The real test wasn't just who abandoned me. It was who revealed themselves as true allies when I had nothing left. And as I began to see clearly, as the fog of heartbreak lifted, I realized something powerful: my sacrifices had never been for nothing. Because the storm wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else, something I had yet to uncover. This was not just a story of loss. It was the story of how I discovered truth in betrayal, strength in weakness, and allies where I least expected them. And by the time the truth exploded in front of everyone, the family, the children, the ones who thought they could abandon me, I wasn't broken anymore. I was ready. Silence is a strange thing. It can be peaceful, but it can also be suffocating. In my house, silence became the language no one wanted to admit they were speaking. My children stopped asking how I was holding up. My family stopped calling unless it was to criticize. Even friends, people I had once bent over backward to help, began to fade into the background. I realized something then: sacrifice makes people comfortable. As long as I was breaking myself to keep everyone else standing, they were happy. But the moment I couldn't carry them anymore, the silence grew. The distance spread. And I was left alone. But I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. I was tired, yes. Worn down to the bone. But I still believed, naively, that they would come back. That when the dust settled, when they saw how hard I was fighting, they would remember who I was. That illusion shattered the night my eldest daughter came home late. She smelled like alcohol, her eyes blazing with anger, and she threw her bag down with a slam. "You don't get it, Mom," she screamed when I asked where she had been. "You've ruined everything. Dad left because of you. Everyone knows it. You're pathetic." The words didn't sting, they burned. Not because they were true, but because she believed them. My own child, the one I'd raised with blood and bone, was standing there blaming me for sacrifices she couldn't yet understand. I didn't yell back. I didn't slap her. I just stood there, quiet, because sometimes silence is louder than rage. But inside, something cracked. A fault line I couldn't ignore. And I knew then, this wasn't just about survival. This was about truth. About seeing who people truly were when masks fell. The weeks that followed were a test I never asked for. My sister came by again, pretending to care. But her eyes weren't soft, they were calculating. She brought up selling the house, suggesting it would make things easier. Easier for who, I wondered? For me, or for her, so she could get her hands on what little remained of my life? I smiled, thanked her for the advice, and tucked her words away like a blade in my back pocket. My parents? They called once, maybe twice. Not to check in, but to tell me I was embarrassing the family with my drama. They wanted me to be strong, but strength, to them, meant silence. It meant swallowing pain so no one else had to see it. But I was done being invisible. And then, there were the whispers. I found out my husband, the man who had abandoned us, was telling people I was unstable. That I had driven him away. That I couldn't manage money, couldn't manage the children, couldn't manage myself. He painted himself as the victim. And me? I became the villain in his story. Do you know what betrayal feels like? It's not the knife going in. It's realizing the person holding it once swore to protect you. But the thing about knives is, they cut both ways. I waited. I stayed quiet. I let them all play their parts: the ungrateful daughter, the greedy sister, the distant parents, the lying husband. I let them build their narrative. Because I knew something they didn't: truth doesn't disappear. It waits. It festers. And eventually, it explodes. The explosion began with something small. My youngest, my sweet child, came home from school crying. She told me other kids were teasing her, repeating things they'd heard from adults. Things about me. About her father leaving. About our family falling apart. That was my breaking point. Not anger. Not violence. But clarity. They wanted me broken, invisible, erased. But I was still here. And I realized, if they wanted to make me the villain, then maybe it was time to show them what happens when the villain stops playing nice. I started keeping records. Every text. Every call. Every cruel word. I wrote it all down. I gathered receipts. Not money, proof. Evidence of betrayal, of lies, of manipulation. I started small with my eldest. Instead of fighting her anger, I asked questions. Who told you Dad left because of me? Where did you hear I was pathetic? She faltered. She stumbled. And the cracks in her certainty widened. With my sister, I played her game. I asked about her life. Her money. Her investments. And she slipped, bragging about things she should never have had access to. Things she could only know if my husband had been whispering in her ear. And my parents? They revealed themselves when they thought I wasn't listening. She's always been weak, my mother said. She can't handle pressure. Weak. They thought I was weak. But weakness isn't what breaks you. It's what teaches you how to bend without shattering. By then, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was watching. Calculating. Waiting for the moment to reveal everything they had done, not with screams, not with tears, but with truth sharp enough to cut. And that moment came sooner than I expected. It was a family gathering. Not a holiday, but something close. A birthday. Everyone was there, my children, my sister, my parents, even my husband, smirking in the corner like he still had control of the narrative. They thought I would stay quiet. They thought I would keep sacrificing, keep swallowing the pain. But silence has an expiration date. I stood up. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't falter. And for the first time, I looked each one of them in the eye and began to speak. Not with rage. Not with theatrics. But with clarity. You think I'm weak. You think I'm pathetic. You think I've ruined this family. But here's the truth, and as the room grew still, as their smug faces began to pale, I laid down every piece of evidence I had gathered. One by one. Every lie. Every betrayal. Every cruel word spoken behind my back. My daughter's tears. My sister's greed. My parents' disdain. My husband's cowardice. It was all there, stripped bare under the light of truth. And by the time I was done, by the time silence returned, it wasn't me who looked weak anymore. It was them. The silence that followed my words was heavier than any scream. For the first time in years, every eye in that room was on me, not with pity, not with disdain, but with something closer to fear. My husband was the first to break. He laughed, too loud, too forced. You're delusional, he said, waving a dismissive hand. She's making this all up. But then I pulled out my phone. I had saved the messages, the recordings, the screenshots. His smirk faded with every word I read aloud. His lies weren't just whispers anymore, they were exposed under the cold, unforgiving light of truth. My sister tried to jump in, her voice shrill, accusing me of twisting things, but her own greed betrayed her. The proof of her manipulation was right there in my notes, her words laid bare. She turned pale, her fake concern unraveling in front of everyone. And my parents? They sat in stunned silence. For once, my mother had no criticism to give, no harsh words ready on her tongue. My father wouldn't even meet my eyes. But the one who cut deepest was my eldest daughter. Her tears rolled down as the weight of her misplaced blame came crashing down. Mom? I didn't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't hug her. Not yet. Forgiveness is not a gift handed out like candy, it's earned, brick by brick, with time and change. The room was chaos after that. Shouts. Accusations. Denials. But I stood calm in the storm. Because for once, they weren't tearing me down, they were tearing themselves apart. And in that chaos, I understood something vital. The truth is never just about what S said, it's about who can stand when it's finally spoken. The fallout was immediate. My husband's reputation, shattered. His friends, his allies, the people he'd poisoned against me, they saw the cracks now. He wasn't the charming victim anymore. He was a liar, exposed and small. My sister stopped calling. Her voice, once so full of fake sympathy, vanished into silence. She couldn't bear to face the reflection of her greed. And my parents? They retreated, embarrassed, ashamed. They didn't apologize, people like them rarely do. But their power over me was gone. Their words no longer had teeth. But my children, that was the hardest part. They looked at me differently now. With guilt. With shame. With the beginnings of understanding. My youngest clung to me, whispering she was sorry. My eldest kept her distance, too proud to break, but I saw the cracks in her armor. She would come around, in her own time. And me? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their weight. Their lies. Their expectations. I had sacrificed everything for them, and when I had nothing left, they abandoned me. But that's the irony, it was only when they left me broken that I found my strength. Because strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing back up in the silence when no one else believes you can. The days that followed were strangely quiet. No more fake phone calls. No more whispers in the dark. No more accusations behind my back. Just space I had never been allowed before. And in that space, I began to rebuild. Not for them. Not to prove them wrong. But for me. I found a job, steady and small, but mine. I began setting boundaries with my children, not walls, but lines they needed to respect. I wasn't their punching bag anymore. I was their mother. Their guide. The one who had stood when everyone else turned away. And slowly, they began to see me, not as weak, not as pathetic, but as someone unbreakable. My eldest came to me one night, her eyes red. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. For everything I said. I didn't understand. I see it now. I held her then. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing to move forward, even when the past still stings. And as I sat there, my children by my side, I realized something I wish I had known all along: sacrifice is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. And survival, true survival, isn't about carrying others until you collapse. It's about learning who deserves to walk beside you when you stand. My husband lost everything. My sister faded into obscurity. My parents had only their own shame left. But me? I gained something greater than money, reputation, or approval. I gained myself. And that, in the end, was the triumph none of them ever expected.